Good afternoon, everyone. I was informed I'm apparently expected to do this every day. Let the record reflect, I'm on time today, which I say not to pat myself.
Hold on,
Matt,
You're actually 2 minutes late.
if you want exact detail what happened, we gave the 2-minute warning. I sat in the room and noticed that not everyone was in here, so I waited for the august representative from the Associated Press to make an appearance before I walked in. So
I appreciate that. You
I-
might not, but
I don't have any opening comments, so Matt, you want to kick us
Can I
off?
ask you about what your understanding is of the hearing that Evan Gershkovich had in Russia today?
Sure. So we understand the hearing took place and that Russia extended the pre-trial detention of Evan Gershkovich by an additional 3 months. We once again call on Russia to comply with their obligation to provide consular access to him. As I discussed yesterday, on Friday, they rejected our second request for consular access to them. The claims against Evan are baseless, and we continue to call for his immediate release as well as for the immediate release of Paul Whelan.
Okay. But you have gotten consular access to him once, right? Or no?
No, they have rejected consular access.
So you haven't gotten any?
Correct.
But there were people in the court today,
We did
right?
have representatives from the embassy in the court today.
But they weren't able to speak to him privately?
I don't know. I don't have an update on whether, I know they were there. I don't have an update on whether they were able to speak with him.
Okay, and per the people who were in there, you don't have any better understanding of the charges against him?
I think that my understanding of the hearing today was that it was a hearing on whether to continue to detain him, and they extended that detention by 3 months. I believe the Embassy Moscow will have a statement coming out. I thought it would be out before the briefing, but if it's not out, it'll be out in the next few minutes with any more details, but I don't have any more details from what happened inside the court.
Thank you.
May I follow up?
Yeah.
Evan's parents were also in attendance at the court. Did the U.S. help arrange their visit to Moscow? Do you approve of this visit? Anything you can comment?
We were aware that they visited Moscow. As I think we've said before, we have been in close contact with Evan's parents since immediately after his detention. We did not help arrange their travel. I will just say personally, I can only imagine how difficult it must be to see your child detained overseas, especially to be detained wrongfully. And so I'm certainly not going to criticize any parent for wanting to see their child. But that being said, we do have a level 4 travel advisory for Russia, and just speaking generally, we do not advise that U.S. citizens travel to Russia. Yeah. Go ahead, Alex.
Just to clarify, just so we have clear understanding of how you're pressing on, still pressing for consular access. At what level have you invited the Russian ambassador to the State Department to express your concern about the latest developments?
So I'm not going to get into the details of back and forth conversations, but we have expressed our concern from the minister level. Secretary Blinken had a conversation with Foreign Minister Lavrov about Evan Gershkovich's detention already this year. We've engaged with them at a number of levels. Our embassy in Moscow has engaged with them. We've engaged with them here. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of those conversations. As I said yesterday, we found that oftentimes when it comes to wrongful detentions, it's unproductive to the release that we seek to talk about all of the conversations we have publicly, but we have consistently pressed the case that number one, Russia needs to fulfill its consular obligations, and number two, they need to immediately release him as well as Paul Whelan.
Have you exhausted your leverages at this point?
I'm not going to speak to any of the details of how we are trying to secure his release, other than to say that it is an ongoing priority for the secretary. It is an ongoing priority for the president. And I will say that even speaking more broadly than the case of Evan Gershkovich or Paul Whelan, the wrongful detention of Americans is one of the top priorities for this department. As you are aware, we have secured the return of more than 24 wrongfully detained Americans since the beginning of this administration. It continues to be our top priority, and we'll continue to work on it with all the tools available to us.
Final follow-up on this. The administration earlier this month sanctioned FSB for its action, particularly going after American citizens. But it stopped short. You guys did not sanction the Russian foreign minister, which is refusing the council access. Is it on the table as an option?
So I don't want to preview any specific sanction action. I will say that, as always, we look at all the tools that are available to us and we use them when we think they're most effective. But if you look at our record, not just with respect to wrongful detentions, but our record with respect to Moscow and Russian government officials and other Russian elites going back to more than a year now, we have not hesitated to use our sanctions authorities to go after any number of officials in that government, including the most senior officials. Sean.
Thanks. I know lots of us are concerned about Evan, but let me move to another topic. Sudan,
Yeah.
the ceasefire that is supposed to take place, that did come into force. What's your assessment of whether it's holding and where things stand right now?
So today in Jeddah, representatives of the Ceasefire Monitoring and Coordination Committee that we announced over the weekend engaged in discussions on humanitarian assistance deliveries, and they also had discussions with their respective chain of command. So that would be the Saudi officials on that group, discussing it with the officials in the Saudi government, Ambassador Godfrey, who leads our representation on the monitoring committee, having conversations with officials in our government regarding allegations of ceasefire violations. We've obviously seen the reports. The officials on the monitoring mechanism are looking into those reports and continuing to monitor, and we have the ability to, when we see violations of the ceasefire, make those known publicly, as well as engaged with directly with both sides to the conflict.
Can I just pursue that? You said the
Yeah.
monitoring mechanism, and of course the secretary spoke to that as well. How do you see that coming? How do you see that working? I mean, do you think that's going to have a shaming effect, if you will, to reduce the violations? Is this just more of a reporting mechanism? How do you see that going?
So what I'd say is the monitoring mechanism is made up of 12 individuals, 3 officials from the U.S. government. Ambassador Godfrey is our lead, and there'll be 2 other officials as well, 3 officials from the Saudi government, as well as 3 officials each from the SAF and the RSF. The way we see the monitoring mechanism is and what it can achieve is a couple of different things. 1, to identify violations of the ceasefire. 2, to publicly hold accountable the parties for the violations of the ceasefire. And then 3, so we have evidence that we can use to privately press the parties. We have had conversations at a number of levels inside this department, both with the top generals and other officials in the SAF and the RSF from the beginning of this conflict, and we'll continue to do that to press them to stop the violence when we see violations of the ceasefire, and also to have conversations with our partners in the region. And then the last thing I will add is that we do have additional tools available to us, and we will not hesitate to use those tools if and when it's appropriate to do so.
Go ahead.
How do you hold the violators accountable? How will you do that? I know you said you have some tools and so on.
I don't want to preview any specific action. Obviously, this is continues to be a very delicate situation where we are involved in intense diplomatic conversations, both directly with the 2 parties and with partners in the region. But we have a number of tools available to us. And we will not hesitate to use those tools if and when it's appropriate to do so. Anything else on Sudan before Sudan? Yeah, go ahead.
You announced $245 million toward humanitarian aid for Sudan today, but since there's not a civilian government in place, how exactly is that going to be distributed?
So let me note, first of all, that the United States remains the largest single donor of humanitarian assistance in Sudan, and we will continue to our support for the vulnerable population in Sudan. The assistance that we announced today is not just for people in Sudan, but for neighboring countries that are experiencing the impacts of the ongoing humanitarian crisis. Specifically with respect to how that will be distributed, it'll be distributed through the State Department's Bureau for Population, Refugee, and Migration, as well as additional humanitarian assistance from USAID. So we have the ability to directly provide humanitarian assistance and then also engage with multilateral organizations in the region. Yeah,
Are you aware
Michelle.
on phone conversations between Israeli Prime Minister and Saudi Crown Prince on the normalization between the 2 countries, and did the U.S. play any role in this regard?
So we are aware of the reports. I would refer you to the 2 countries to speak to them in any detail. And of course, those are 2 countries with which we engage regularly, but I'm not going to speak to any private diplomatic conversations. I will say, as a broader measure, we of course fully support Israel's integration into the Middle East region, including normalizing relations with Saudi Arabia.
Can I just follow up on this?
Yeah.
real quick? Okay. Thank you. It is said that Prime Minister Netanyahu is, either speaking or spoke with Saudi Crown Prince MBS on about flights, for the pilgrimage for a Hajj, direct flights for Israel. But it is also that was reported in the Times of Israel, but it is alleged that the Saudis are insisting on allowing PA security officers on the compound of Haram Sharif. Are you aware of such talks? And would you support the presence of Palestinian PA security in Al-Aqsa and Haram Sharif?
Again, I think it's more appropriate for those two governments that were involved in the reported talks to speak to any details about them. I would say, as a general matter, the United States continues to strongly support the historic status quo on the Haram al-Sharif Temple Mount.
Right, but it's the United States that really trained Palestinian security, supports them, finances them, and all these things. So they wield a lot of power over the Palestinian security. Does that factor in any way?
I will say, as I just said, we continue to support the longstanding historic status quo. That's been our policy for some time, and I don't have any further comment.
Lebanon. Germany issues arrest warrant for Lebanon Central Bank, Riyad Salemi. This is like the second arrest warrant within 1 week. The first one came from France, and it's from Germany. What's your take on that? Since it's a very kind of sensitive matter for the Lebanese economy, it's crashing right now, and this will add more insecurity for the economy that is already clashed.
So I would say, with respect to the specific reports, we would leave that to our German partners to comment on them, just as last week we left it to the government of France. I will say, in general, it is for the Lebanese government to determine who continues to serve in that position. We work with the designated governor in his or her official capacity, and I will say more broadly, as we've said before, it is important that the Lebanese government respect the established process for appointing a new governor and focus on the task of stabilizing Lebanon's economy and effecting meaningful change.
One question about the displaced Syrians. I'm stressing on the word displaced, not refugees, because a big number, as reports indicated, big numbers, they go back to Syria and then go back to Lebanon and get paid a salary for UNHCR. So they don't really have a security problem going back home. Why this administration is not kind of pushing these displaced Syrians to go back home safe for good?
So I will say that we continue to engage with our partners in the region about that issue, about the return of refugees to Syria, but I don't have anything to add on in specifically.
Yes, my question is about Mexico and the illegal use of surveillance there. Today, the New York Times is publishing a front page story showing how the Mexican army has been widely using commercial spyware to target a wide array of persons in Mexico. Does the State Department condemn this type of use of commercial spyware? And given the administration has spoken so forcefully against the misuse of surveillance, what does it say that one of your closest allies incurs in this practice?
So I have seen those reports. I haven't even had a chance to read the full story. I don't have any comment on them in detail, other than to say that the U.S.-Mexico relationship is one of the most important and dynamic in the world, but I don't have any specific comment on that report in the New York Times.
U.S. doesn't condemn the misuse of...
I said I haven't had a chance to look at that report in detail, and I don't think it'd be appropriate for me to comment on it in detail until I have done so.
Not even in general around the world?
I understand what you would like me to say. However, I think with respect to the report in the Times, until I've had a chance to read it in detail and talk with my colleagues about it, I don't think it'd be appropriate for me to make any comment. Go ahead, Molly.
Thank you, Matt. Could you provide an update, please, on the State Department's facilitating access to the Afghanistan dissent cable to the leadership of the House Foreign Affairs Committee?
Sure. So as we made public last week, we made an offer to the committee that that Chairman McCall and Ranking Member Meeks could come here to the State Department to view both the dissent channel cable itself and Secretary Blinken's response. They accepted that offer, and it's our understanding that they will visit the department today to review the cable and the response.
Has consideration been made for their, or for the chairman's sort of counter that access be brought into other membership of the committee?
I would say, as a general principle, we continue to believe it's important to protect the confidentiality of the dissent channel. We understand the need to give Congress the information it needs to do its job, but we want to protect the ability of State Department employees to do their job. We've seen the comments that Chairman McCall has made about this issue publicly, of extending access to the other members of the committee. We will continue to engage with him on this question, and as we've said for some time, we hope to reach some kind of final resolution.
Should
No, they
the,
just-
the,
I think
the
one-
prospect of the enforcement of that subpoena be resuscitated, you think that you might consider facilitating broader access?
I think for this point, we'll continue to keep the conversations confidential with the chairman, but we understand that he and Ranking Member Meeks will view the cable today, and as I said, we hope to achieve some resolution to the
Thank
matter.
you. On one quick separate topic, if I may.
Yeah.
Does the State Department have a view on the impetus behind the apparent pardoning of Roman Protasevich in Belarus by Lukashenko? Do you have clarity onto the circumstances of that pardon?
Not clarity into the circumstances, as I think you're aware. We don't have a lot of direct conversations with the Lukashenko regime. I will say generally, the release of even one political prisoner in Belarus is a positive sign, particularly when the total number of political prisoners continues to grow and now has reached more than 1,500. But that does not excuse the Lukashenko regime's blatant violation of international civil aviation regulations when it diverted the Ryanair flight 2 years ago for the sole purpose of arresting, Mr. Patrusevich. After his arrest, he was unconscionably used as a tool of Belarusian state media. He was paraded in front of TV cameras, coerced into confessing. And while he was pardoned, Ms. Sepika, who was sentenced with him, continues to serve her 6-year detention and today. And we reiterate our call for the regime to unconditionally release all political prisoners unjustly detained in Belarus. All right, Gita.
Thank you. And one, Matt, after months of detention of the 2 journalists who broke the news on how Mahsa Amini was actually killed or died, the judiciary has set a date for their trial, which is next week. They've been one of the charges is collaboration with the United States. Do you have any comments on that? And also any thoughts on the escalation of executions in that country?
So I will say, with respect to that specific question, we reject those charges. They are obviously not true. And I will note that over the course of the protests, Iranian authorities have repeatedly violated Iranians' human rights, punished them for executing their essential freedoms. This includes not just members of the Iranian public who came forward to protest, but also the journalists in the country. Sham trials and executions have been key components of the regime's attempt to suppress any form of dissent, and we, once again, as we have on a number of occasions, call on Iranian authorities to stop their arbitrary detentions, stop their sham trials, and stop denying the Iranian people the fundamental freedoms that they deserve.
How about on escalation of executions?
I will say that we have been concerned about the way the Iranian regime has used executions after, as I said a minute ago, what we believe are sham trials.
That's one more in Iran.
Yeah.
Just President Raisi is in Jakarta. He's signed some agreements on trade with the Indonesians. Does the United States have any stance on that? The United States has good relations with Indonesia. Do you have any position?
So I don't have any specific comment on their visit. I will say that in general, we do continue to vigorously enforce our sanctions on Iran. We don't hesitate to take action against sanctions invaders. We've taken those actions numerous times in the world, and we regularly engage with countries and strongly discourage them from taking steps with respect to Iran that contravene U.S. sanctions. Alex, you've already had like 4 questions. Go ahead.
A couple of different things. Just in a response a minute ago on Syria, you sort of talked about engaging partners in the region about return of refugees. Just to clarify, is the U.S. sort of discussing the possible return of Syrian refugees?
I don't think I want to comment in detail about our conversations with partners in the region.
Right, but there are conversations rather than about the issue of refugees. These are conversations about.
I probably should have said about the issue of refugees to be more precise.
Sure. Okay. And just on the Afghan cable, are you saying it's possible that, as well as the visit today to see that to view the cable, this will be extended to all members of the committee? Can you clarify that?
What I would say is we believe, as we said in the letter that we sent to Chairman McCall and Ranking Member Meeks, that making the cable available to the chairman and the ranking member to view in private was an extraordinary accommodation on behalf of the State Department. We believe that ought to satisfy our obligation or to provide them with the information that they need, but we will continue to engage with them about the overall question.
And just one more separate issue. Sorry to range around. On the sort of cross-border offensive in Russian territory, I know you sort of touched on this briefly yesterday, but and I know that the policy is that American supplied weapons shouldn't be used in attacks on Russian soil. But is there any U.S. position on whether you support or would denounce an attack, whether using U.S. weapons or not, but an attack into another country, but I guess the Russians would say this is terrorism. So does the U.S. have like a position in any way, sort of to the people who did this, if we don't know yet who it was?
Let me say a few things about it. Number one, we've seen some of the reports circulating on social media and elsewhere making claims that U.S. supplied weapons were used in these attacks. I will say that we're skeptical at this time of the veracity of these reports. As a more general principle, as we've said, and I believe I said yesterday, we do not encourage or enable strikes inside of Russia, and we've made that clear. But as we've also said, it is up to Ukraine to decide how to conduct this war.
I'm sorry, what does that mean? You're skeptical of these reports. Either you know or you don't.
I will say we've seen a lot of reports on social media and fuzzy pictures on social media and a lot of kind of armchair intelligence analysts making claims. We're skeptical that they are accurate.
Well, why are you only skeptical? Why can't you say why can't you just?
Because we don't have perfect clarity on the information. We're looking at the same pictures that you see, the same fuzzy images, and at this time we are skeptical of their veracity. Let me work through. You've had Alex, come on, you've had a couple already. Let me go ahead.
Thank you so much, sir. Jahan Zeb Ali from ARY News TV, Pakistan. Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan targeting innocent Pakistan since long, and after the strong support from the Afghan Taliban, we have seen a rise in their activities. Recently, they have attacked at an oil and gas facility in Pakistan. There were more than 50 terrorists. After the attack, they fled to Afghanistan. So my question is that, are you concerned on the regrouping of terrorist networks in Afghanistan? Because it is not only TTP, there's Daesh, there's Al-Qaeda, and many more.
Let me say a few things. Number one, we are saddened by the devastating reports concerning the deadly militant attack at the Pakistan oil and gas facility, which killed 4 security troops and 2 private guards. We extend our deepest sympathies to the families of those who were killed, and we wish a speedy recovery to those who were injured. We continue to closely follow the developments, but we understand that responsibility for the attack has not yet been claimed or attributed.
So there's a political chaos in Pakistan, and in recent days we have seen a crackdown against political workers and journalists. The Pakistani government and military leadership decided to try these arrested civilians under military laws. The national and international human rights organizations criticize this decision. What are your thoughts?
I will say, as we've said before, we continue to monitor the situation in Pakistan very closely. We don't have a position on one political candidate or another inside Pakistan. We call for the respect and equal application of democratic principles, freedom of expression and rule of law around the world. And of course, in Pakistan, we urge that these principles be respected for all people.
Would you call for to respect the human rights during this political chaos?
Of course we do. As I just said, we always call for the respect of democratic principles, freedom of expression, and rule of law around the world, in Pakistan and every other country around the world.
Africa?
Who was that? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, Matt. First, let me just say that it's wonderful to see you at the podium.
Thank you.
And I look forward to engaging you on the entire continent of Africa. Pearl with Premium Times Nigeria. Matt, I have 3 questions to pose to you. My first question is, the White House did announce the presidential delegation that will be going to President-elect Tinubu's inauguration over for May 29. What do you say to the population of Nigeria who might view now the U.S. Sort of embrace of Tinubu, whereas at the same time you have kind of indicated that the elections may not have been free, fair, and credible, yet there seems to be this embrace of Tinubu. So if you could share something on that, that would be great. The second question I have for you is Africa Day is in 2 days, May 25. And in the U.S. strategy towards sub-Saharan Africa and its keenness to engage and deepen relationships and partnerships there, what message do you have as we head into Africa Day when millions are still facing instability, conflict, and other things? Third, I saw the humanitarian assistance that you announced today for Sudan and neighboring countries, Chad and others. Do you have a breakdown there on those countries? And is it going to be limited to those? Why? I mean, I may understand Egypt, but Egypt already receives a disproportionately huge amount of assistance from the United States. Could you share the motivation and thinking behind that? Thanks.
So let me say, first of all, thank you for the question, and likewise, I look forward to taking your questions, especially when you ask me difficult three-parters that challenge my ability to even remember all the questions, let alone answer them. To take them in order, attempt to take them in order. Let me say first, with respect to Nigeria, we did take steps last week in support of the democratic process in Nigeria to impose visa restrictions on individuals believed to be responsible for or complicit in undermining the democratic process in the country. That said, those steps that were specific to certain individuals and certain individuals alone and were not directed to the Nigerian people or the government of Nigeria as a whole. As we made clear, as I think we read out last week, the Secretary just had a call with his counterpart in the Nigerian government, and we look forward to continuing to cooperate with them on issues of shared concern. With respect to your question about our sub-Saharan strategy, I will say that Africa continues to be a priority for the Biden-Harris administration. Our U.S.-Africa strategy is rooted in the recognition that sub-Saharan Africa is a major geopolitical force, and we look at sub-Saharan Africa as partners, and the country in that part of the countries in that part of the world as partners. Countries in sub-Saharan Africa have some of the most rapidly expanding economies, a growing and young population, large free trade areas, one of the world's diverse ecosystems, and one of the largest regional voting groups in the United Nations. So I will say we look forward to continuing to work with not just the governments, but of course engaging directly with the people of the entire African continent. And then finally, I will say with respect to your third question, I'm not aware of the exact breakdown of aid and which countries it might be which particular tranches of aid might be going to, but we'd be happy to follow up after the briefing.
Thank
Yeah.
Thank you. Former UK Prime Minister Liz Truss traveled to Taiwan, and in speech in Taipei, she called for development of economic NATO to coordinate pushback against Beijing. Did the U.S. welcome Liz Truss's visit to Taiwan, and do you share that vision for economic NATO? Is this on the table vis-a-vis U.S.-UK relations at all, and what's your overall stance on economic NATO, this idea?
Our overall stance on?
Economic NATO.
I will say, with respect to Liz Truss's visit, I don't have any specific comment on it, and with respect to the rest of your question, let me take that one back. I'll come back. I'll come back to both of you, but after I've go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Senator Menendez said the other day that the approvals for the sale of F-35 jets that Greece is asking have been given, he said. And he said, quote, so they are coming, end quote, to Greece. Can you tell us if the State Department sent already this request by Athens to buy the F-35?
I don't have any update with respect to that. that issue. I will, but I don't believe we have any update with respect to the sale of F-35s. Go ahead.
There was a report that Chinese new ambassador, Xi Feng, would arrive in Washington as early as today. Has he arrived already come to DC? Do you expect any meeting between him and high-profile official of the Biden administration in coming days? And would you think his assignment could have a positive effect on the bilateral relationship between United States and PRC?
So I don't know the exact status of where he is at any given point. That's probably a question better directed to the embassy here. I will say that the United States welcomes the arrival of Ambassador-designate Xi Yefeng from the People's Republic of China. We look forward to working with the Ambassador-designate and his team. We remain committed, as we've said on a number of occasions, to maintaining channels of communication with the PRC to responsibly manage competition. And our understanding is that in terms of when officials here will meet with them, the Office of the Chief of Protocol here at the State Department will work with the PRC embassy on the presentation of credentials in accordance with standard State Department practices and diplomatic norms. Go ahead.
So you reiterated today that you don't encourage or enable attacks outside Ukraine's attacks outside of its borders, but in the context of U.S.-provided air defense and soon maybe F-16s, does that also apply to Russian planes being in Russian airspace, because they often perform their strikes against civilians and civilian infrastructure from within its borders? So I'm wondering what the
did you just say that Russians have not executed
no,
strikes?
No, they do. They I mean, the Russian Air Force conducts their strikes usually. I mean, a lot of the times from within their territory, airspace. So does your guidance on not encouraging attacks on outside of Ukraine's border also cover the Russian planes in Russian airspace?
So I'm just going to say that again that we do not encourage or enable attacks outside Ukraine's borders. But I do think it is important to step back and always remember that it is Russia who is the aggressor here. It is Russia, as you alluded to, that is launching attacks on civilian infrastructure. Russia that is bombing civilian targets, is taking out schools and hospitals and killing civilians by the thousands. So we will leave it to our Ukrainian partners to decide how to conduct this war. But as I've said on a number of occasions, and as the President and the Secretary and the National Security Advisor have made clear, we don't encourage or enable strikes beyond Ukraine's borders.
And on the attack on the Belgorod region, do you know what? Do you have a position on who's behind it?
We don't. We are aware of the reports, but I don't have any more specific information about it.
Tensions rise between Afghanistan and Iran over the Helmand River Dam as the Taliban continue to build the dam. What is the U.S. reaction to any possible escalation between Afghanistan and Iran? And second question, in the past few weeks, Afghan women activists took to the street and they demanded the right to work and education. Does the U.S. have any new pressure strategy to pressure the Taliban?
So I will say, with respect to tensions between Iran and Afghanistan, I don't have any specific comment other than that obviously we would be concerned about any increased tensions in the region. With respect to the Taliban, I will just reiterate what we have said for some time, and that we encourage the Taliban to stop its crackdown on human rights, to stop its repression of women. We understand that the Taliban continues to seek international recognition, but to get international recognition, they have to earn legitimacy, and that is very difficult to achieve as long as they continue to suppress their own people, and especially as they continue these horrific attacks on women inside the country. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Matt. good to see you in the podium.
Thank you.
This is Mushfiqul Fadal, representing South Asia Perspectives. On Myanmar, in the United Nations linked body found Myanmar's military regime has procured more than 1 billion worth of arms and raw materials, weapons, mostly from the Russia, China, and India, since it ousted a democratically elected government in February 2021, and these weapons using against the pro-democratic protesters. So what is your comment that?
I am not aware of that specific report. I'll have to take it back and get you a comment on it. Yeah, go ahead.
This
Sean.
is just, I realize you may not have anything, this might be more for the Pentagon, but since we're here, Russia.
You've already given me an answer, but go ahead.
So, there's your answer.
You shouldn't make it easy for me.
It's a serious matter, though. The Russian Defense Ministry saying that they intercepted 2 U.S. jets just now of the Baltic Sea. Is that something you're familiar with?
I'm not aware of it, and I as I said at some point yesterday, I'm going to make it a practice not to comment on things that break while I'm up here at the podium that I've not yet had a chance to confirm or discuss with my colleagues.
Does the department have any position on the controversial meeting that took place in Moscow between high-level UN Special Representative on Children and the Russian Ombudsman on Children, aka wanted war criminal?
I don't think I have any specific comment on that meeting, other than I will say we continue to be concerned about Russia's actions in Ukraine. We have expressed our concern and our shock and our outrage about those actions on a number of occasions. We've made clear in calling Russia's actions war crimes, and we continue to seek accountability for those actions.
Take a question from me, so get back to me.
Sure.
And you might have seen the reports about Russia preventing Black Sea grain deal. Today, Ukraine had to actually halt operations because of that reason.
Yeah, I saw that, and I will say once again, Russia continues to obstruct the normal operations of this life-saving initiative. Really, since almost since the ink was first dry on the first Black Sea Grain Initiative agreement, Russia began to complain about the agreement publicly, began to obstruct it. We should be very clear about what happened here. The parties agreed to enable unimpeded exports of Ukrainian food from 3 ports. Now Russia is refusing to allow ships to one of those 3. It is a clear violation of their commitments under the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Their obstruction of this initiative, their continued obstruction of this initiative, and threats to withdraw threaten to push up global food prices, threaten to reduce food accessibility for vulnerable populations around the world. And we once again call on Russia to stop holding global food supplies hostage. So you got your hand up, and this will be the last one. I've got to go.
Iran-related question.
What'd you say? Iran-related?
Iran, yes, if I may. The Israeli Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, accused Iran of converting merchant ships into military vessels and rocket launching platforms and so on with airplanes and so on. Are you aware of this accusation?
I don't have any specific comment on that, but I don't think you'll be surprised to hear me say that we have long been concerned about Iran's activities in the region.
But would that be, a great deal of concern for you, like a threat to the United States and its interest in the region?
I don't want to comment on that specific report. Thank you all.